All right, we're back from the break. Justin, great insights on kind of how the Jedi use the Force. That's going to be a big debate, I think, forever and always with Star Wars fan. What are the rules? What aren't the
Right.
rules?
Well, you know
How
what's actually kind of
midi
disappointing
chlorian
to me?
count? You know.
Yes. And speaking of midi-chlorians,
Mhm.
did you see what George Lucas said about where he was going to take the sequel trilogy if Disney had actually listened to him? He said in an interview he wanted to explore the Force. What are the wills? What are the midi-chlorians? And he said he wanted to go to a microscopic level and take it there. And I was
Mm.
like, I want to see that. That's what, like, that intrigues me
Well, you
because
may
that's
get
the
that
Force.
with James Mangold's sort of Force origin
Ooh.
sort of movie that he's working on. So.
And that has me excited just watching the Acolyte. I'm like, man, this time, how did the Jedi start? This time of the High Republic, all of these things are things we have not seen before in live action, and it's and that was what was fresh about Andor too. I thought that it just wasn't something we had seen before, and a lot of these other things are familiar things and nostalgia things. And that actually leads me to a question that I had for you because I always love hearing Kevin Cole's interpretations. You and Adam, our friend Adam Joyner, used to do a pitch where you would talk
Mhm.
about what this franchise could be or what this story could be. So I wanted to ask you, with Star Wars, it's like any long running franchise. You think about like Superman and with DC, Marvel and Spider Man, any of these stories that they want to be long lasting and they don't want to have an end because they want to keep selling and keep making money off of them. Where Star Wars is kind of in that catch 22 of how much do you give the old fans versus how much do you give the new fans? Because you need to really appease both. You need the old fans to come in because they have that um not nostalgia, but they have that sense of almost like a sense of duty. Like, oh, I love Star Wars in the past, so I want to give it to my children. I want to pass it down to the next generation. But then if you don't appeal to the next generation, then you're kind of like stuck and then the old people are going to die off and you won't have any new fans. So, in your opinion, is this the right move for Disney? Because I feel like they've been struggling to figure out where do they take Star Wars? Like, what direction do they take it in? They tried the sequel trilogy and they tried to do that, and they've tried this, like the Mandalorian, Ahsoka. I feel like is leaning towards the original trilogy stuff, and even the prequels with Ahsoka. But what do they do in your mind to appeal to both sides and still make it
Mm.
fresh?
Yeah, it's a quandary. I think we're seeing it in real time right now. If you just go look at the Rotten Tomatoes and the Metacritic and the review bombing, there seems to be this critic versus audience divide. How much of that is real? We won't maybe ever know because of the review bombing stuff. But my initial take is, and I think we talked about this maybe in a previous podcast around just like our blockbuster movies dead or are or
Mm,
superhero movies dead, and I think the same
yeah.
answer I gave there applies here, in that people put butts in the seat, or on the couch, depending on if it's a streaming thing or a movie, theatrical release, because of nostalgia, but they stay because of narrative. And I think that's really what comes down to it, is you have to constantly provide people a concept within Star Wars that they haven't seen before.
Mm,
And I think that's what makes it compelling. The old fans, they want to see something new, because if it's just a fan film, then what's the point? Go watch New Hope. Go watch Empire Strikes Back. It's there. Go watch it on VHS or Laserdisc or whatever version of it you want to watch. Um, you know, but you should want to have something new. Um, and I think Disney has unfortunately when you look at the scoreboard, I don't want to say they failed, but they haven't really been consistent in trying to figure out what that new thing is. Um, so the easy thing is like, let's default back to what fans will invest in. So I think what you're getting right now is this healthy balance of, okay, you got the Filoni verse stuff, which I think is for the fans and the people that like the universal cosmic connection and things and all that. But then you've got like the Gilroys touching the Acolyte. You've got and I apologize. Who's the showrunner and creator of the Acolyte?
Leslie Headland.
Leslie Headland doing that. And I think I said Acolyte for Tony Gilroy. I meant Andor.
Yeah.
You got Tony Gilroy doing Andor. You got Leslie Headland doing Acolyte. These are like prolific character development, dramatic sort of creatives. And so allowing these type of people to do exactly what I'm saying, which is, hey, there's this canvas, there's this world of Star Wars that we know, and there's certain rules, but we're gonna play in that sandbox a little differently. I think there could have been so much temptation to bring Yoda into this show, The Acolyte, because he's alive during this time. He's like
Yeah.
700 something years old. He's training Jedi. He's in the Young Jedi Adventures TV show that my kid watches. And like, so he's hanging out. And like the temptation to appease the fans would be to like have Yoda just like hang like right there in Coruscant, like
Hmm.
doing
As a
his
main
thing,
character.
and
Yeah.
he's hanging out with Saul and he's hanging out with everybody else. And I think that's like a mistake. And I love, like, even if there was a choice to do that, to not make that choice creatively and say, you know what, we're going to focus around this group of characters. Um, and let's scale it down and like create a mystery that involves all of them, and we'll unravel this. But this mystery also happens to tie into something that has a much larger impact to the chronology that eventually leads up to the prequels of, this is the beginning of the end for the Jedi. Because what you're seeing in the background of the first two episodes, and we haven't talked about this, so I'm gonna open it up now, is what you're getting is the sense of what the people in this universe are starting to think of the Jedi.
Yeah.
There's, you had the smuggler guy who's helping May talk about how, there's this belief that the Jedi, that everyone has about the Jedi, that I don't remember the exact line, but like he's very much spitting like a very different viewpoint. Um, I think you're almost getting the sense of too, like, I don't know, somebody texted us this. Maybe it was Rob Keys from Screen Rant, but like, are the Jedi like kidnapping kids or stealing kids or taking them? And I think that was kind of their MO, right? It's like, if you have a if you have force capabilities, we're gonna find and locate you, we're gonna take you away from your family, and we're gonna put you into Jedi school. And then eventually you either make it or you don't. And it's like, um, that's a very interesting thing. That's like the equivalent of sending your kids to, um, you know, convent or boarding school or something like that. But going back to like, we want to see something new. There's a creator out there right now that I adore his content, and it's uh, Taylor Sheridan, who does the Yellowstone universe,
Hmm.
Yellowstone series, and he, 1883, and the I think the sequel to that one's 1923. And
Yeah.
what I love about what he's done is, um, obviously it's not a fantasy, but it's a western. He's taken the western sort of traditional tropes and created this really awesome sort of multi-layered universe around this family. So, and modernized it. Like, it's not your father's John Wayne type thing. It's like a modern day kind of concept. But then you go back and see the family history in 1883. You get to see their family history in 1923, and so you get different stories about these. And again, it's, what are stories? Stories are about people. They're about people, and they're about lives, and they're about good and bad and ugly and everything in between. That's a story. And so I think the only thing that I wish the Acolyte could do better, and I think this would have elevated it to Andor level, is if the episodes were longer. They're
Mm,
30 minutes. Andor, I think, were like almost 48 to
I
55-minute
think so.
long
Yeah.
episodes. That 20-minute difference gives you a lot of runway to develop these characters. Um, like there's scenes in Andor like that just stick with me. Like it's like very simple. Like the scene where Mon Mothma is leaving Stellan Skarsgård's little uh,
Um,
archive or
yeah.
whatever he's
Like
calling it, whatever it
antique
is,
store. Yeah.
antique dealership,
Yeah.
thing, and like she's just sitting there staring out the window, and she's in this like incredible amount of like conflict, and it's like that is how you take something new and bring it into Star Wars, you know. So to go back to the root of your question, like what does Star Wars need to do to continue to exist? I think they just need to continue to be okay with um, bringing in new things, but also maintaining what Star Wars is. Star Wars is and there was some familiarity in this show. You had a wise green person leading the Jedi Order. You had lines like "the Force is an ocean, a vast ocean." Don't use your eyes, don't trust them. I mean, just and those were things I think that were really well used as nostalgic pieces that we know and brought back. The I got a bad feeling about this. I could have done without. It's like that felt a little forced. It's like why do we have to have that in every Star Wars thing? Like it's like and I don't even think there's a generation of people that watch this stuff if they're watching that care.
Mm,
And I feel like the fans complain about it more than anything. Um, you could go down the path of like the whole diversity element, like there needs to be more diverse actors and things like that. I think this show is proving that's true. I mean, I like that you have a very diverse cast. It brings something a little different. But there's this big debate online about like female characters can't somehow succeed in a Star Wars property. That's why Ray was, and it's all due to the male dominant fan base of the Star Wars. And I don't know if I agree with that either. I think it's more of like just find a good story and everything else
yes.
kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Like Daisy Ridley's great. Ray, I think there's a lot of pieces about her that are great. She just wasn't given a lot. Um, Ahsoka, it was fine. I think Dave Filoni knew what was going on there because he'd been building that character for years. Um, but you got other pieces that just didn't really that haven't landed. So I don't think it's a gender thing. It's just we need good stories. Um, so there's stories I'd like to see. I mean, going back to the gender comment real quick, the best female character ever in the history of Star Wars is Princess Leia. Like she's iconic. So you can't tell me that like females don't work in Star Wars, and stuff like that. So it's just and she was ahead of her time when George Lucas wrote her that way as this dominating sort of character that could hold her own against the two men that she was, fighting the fight with.
Yeah.
So, what I want to see with Star Wars is I think there's certain elements that I love. You got to have a good lightsaber battle at some point. I mean, that's just expected. You got to have great, ship type scenes where ships are fighting other ships and lasers are flying around and you have that sort of military kind of things. I go back to Rogue One. Again, it's sort of weird to me that Andor and Rogue One in the modern era of Star Wars almost stand out to me as like two of the best things that have ever happened because they they were character driven. It was real stakes. It was like even with Rogue One, you knew what was going to happen because you've seen New Hope. But it's like you're seeing these events unfold for the first time, like the ground attacks and you got the aerial battles. Like that was a Star Wars film, but at the same time, you had these very like choke scenes where like she wants to kill Ben Mendelsohn's character because of like what happened to her dad, or the scene where she finds out her dad was just, you know, tortured by the loss of her and her mom, like just so many good things. So like, but then you get Solo, and there's like not one damn moment in Solo that's like, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like, I think it comes down to just you got to be, and I'm like totally belaboring the point at this state, but great storytelling. I think narrative and nostalgia, when you have the right balance between the two, I think that's what'll keep Star Wars alive. I'm going to end on this thing, and then we'll flip it back to you. I What I like about the Acolyte is the concentration of Asian actors. Um, and more importantly, Asian style production. Like you can see in the background, like there's things that like, oh, that looks like feudal Japan, and things like that. And then you have like the martial arts, which we talked about, and it's like, I think this is true. Star Wars is actually, it's been inspired by tons of like Kurosawa type stuff. George Lucas pulled from a lot of that. But what's interesting is from a business perspective, it has not performed well in Chinese markets or some Asian markets when they go and release like the movies and stuff. Like financially, they haven't performed well. And I think
Mm.
a lot of it is because that culture is like, well, we already have our own stuff that's like we think is better, mangas and all those kind of things. And it's like you kind of stole from us and made this thing, and it's like, whatever. So I like
Yeah.
that they're trying to get another audience from across the globe interested in Star Wars, whether it's casting people that look like them or pulling more from that kind of culture and putting that into the Star Wars world. Um, and we're going to see light whips and all kinds of
Mm.
cool stuff. And so I think like um, those are other ways to sort of enhance this Star Wars universe, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, even in
so,
the animated stuff, they're trying to do more anime style stuff with Star Wars Visions and
mhm.
just the new takes on it. I think, or maybe that's also trying to be more of a worldwide appeal. But I think, and they have even mangas that have come out in the High Republic era that are just they are straight up manga, and there's nothing like Americanized about it. So I think that is also a play at trying to get the Asian markets a little bit more interested. But yeah, that's a great point. That so much of it is inspired by Asian culture. You think about the samurai films, like Darth
Mhm.
Vader's armor, the stormtrooper armor, the and then not only samurai but also I think ninja. Like we're getting it even in this one with Maze jumping in and out of the ceiling and stuff, and her almost doing a smoke bomb, but where she used the force to push the sand in front of everybody's face. There's a ton of Asian elements that are in this, and
Mhm.
I think there's two things that this series does that it pays homage to the original, but also still trying to be modern that I kind of like you said, the Asian inspired locations and some of the costumes and wardrobe. And then also I think the font using like the same type of font that was in the original trilogy. I think that and they use wipes too. There's a lot of wipes in here.
Yep.
So those little things add up in your I think subconsciously you're like, "Oh yeah, this feels like the Star Wars universe. This feels like where I'm supposed to be." And I think that's good, and it's not the JJ Abrams I'm going to copy the exact template of the originals, even down to another Death Star. Like that to me is being too beholden to the original trilogy and trying to go beat for beat almost of what the originals was and then make the sequels that I mean that was the big criticism about episode 7 when it came
Right.
out was a lot of people were enjoying it but they were like, "Man, this feels a little bit too familiar. Not enough of it is new."
The Force Awakens got a pass because financially it was very successful. And I think critically it was, and I think audience loves it. I think it got a free pass because there had been so much time that had passed from
Yes.
the last time we saw a Star Wars
Mhm.
movie, and even more time that had passed since the last time we had heard the names Leia, Luke, and Han on the big screen. Um, and so again, that goes back to nostalgia gets us in the seat, narrative is what keeps us there. It was a familiar enough movie to us and a story enough to us while introducing some tiny new things that you could build on. And then they get penalized by allowing Ryan Johnson to say, "Well, hey, I want to like subvert expectations." And then the fans are like, "No, no, 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 we want more of the same." And it's like,
Yeah.
you really don't. Um,
Yeah. Right.
Now, again, I don't agree with how they handled Luke and the whole thing during the trilogy, and then Palpatine's alive, whatever. All of that. We won't go into that. We've talked about it on previous episodes of the show, but yeah, there's this tightrope, right? I think at the end of the day, there's always going to be a tightrope with any Star Wars content of how do you appeal to general modern new audiences while also making the hardcore fans excited and happy. And I think I really do believe, and I said this on my, or wrote this on my blog article. I said it at the opening of the episode. This show is a middle ground. I think it's a nice middle ground between that those things. I think it's a nice middle ground between Andor and Ahsoka, and but I do think that there's this also this like business part that goes beyond all this. The Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm president, Disney investors, the Disney ownership, where it's like they're the galactic empire that sort of has the control, and
Yeah.
it's like you're gonna have filmmakers that want to come in and do like things that they think are really awesome that may get a little handcuffed, right? Due to um, their opinion on what that tightrope is and what that
Right.
balance is between the light side and the dark side. If we want to go there, there's a podcast I want to listen to. I'll pitch them. We don't have any affiliation with them, but I just really enjoy them. The Watch, Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald on the Ringer, and I'm interested to get their perspective because they were not fans of Ahsoka, but they loved Andor. So I'd be very interested to hear what they have to say about the Acolyte, especially because they were also big fans of the Russian doll
Mm.
stuff that Leslie Headland made. So yeah, but I
I'm
go back
actually
to the
I was gonna say
yeah.
I'm actually moving that to the top of my list. I see that their episode came out 5 hours ago. I hadn't
Hmm.
refreshed my podcast, so yeah, I'm moving this up to the top of my list.
Yeah, it's what's going to make me fall asleep later. So, but I think Marvel has the same problem. I think any of these blockbuster franchise tent poles have is the same
DC,
problem.
yep.
DC's going to have the same problem with Superman. If the story, like people are going to go because Superman is just a culturally iconic character here in this country. Um, but if the story doesn't lock them in and is not worth talking about, is not worth sharing, and is not worth creating an event over, then it's not going to carry, and it'll get buried in the monotony and of everything else. I hate to say it, but like a lot of people really liked the new Furiosa Mad Max movie. I haven't seen it yet, but then there's a lot of people that are like, "Yeah, it's a Mad Max movie. It's just kind of George Miller with his style. You've seen one, you've seen them all," and
Hmm.
it's like, so he didn't do anything new. All right, I'll just wait for it. I think we talked about it on a previous episode of the show where it's like the Marvels. It was like, well, it didn't bring anything new to the overall scheme of things or establish anything new, um, but it wasn't a bad movie. It was fun. It was entertaining. I actually really enjoyed it. I finally saw it on Disney Plus with my wife, and we actually really liked it. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. But it was
Yeah.
like it wasn't enough to get me to the theater
Mm.
to create
Yeah.
an event around my life to go
Right.
see it. That's the
Yeah.
movie piece. The streaming piece is I'm willing to give you an hour of my time. Make it worth the while.
Right.
And you know, Book of Boba Fett. I suffered through that. Like that
That's my
was
least favorite.
there was things I really liked. Like I liked was the blue guy, the blue kind of western looking dude that what was
Oh,
his name?
the sniper.
Yeah. I liked
Cad
him,
Bane.
and
Cad Bane.
yeah, Cad Bane. I liked
Mhm.
him. I liked Timothy Oliphant's character coming back. I
Yes,
liked
yes.
some of that. Um, I liked the Mandalorian season 2.5 elements of the series,
That was
but
the only thing I liked about it.
yeah, it was just yeah, we're not going to do it. We're not going to give Book of
I
Boba
mean,
Fett enough airtime on this. But
the thing that I always go back to, and I've said this on other podcasts, does the thing justify its existence? Like Book of Boba Fett, did it prove why we needed that? Why did we
no.
need to see Boba Fett again? And I don't think it did. I don't think it answered that question of do you give us justification for why you exist? And that's what I feel like with a lot of these properties, or not properties, but a lot of these things, projects that we're getting, they're just to make money and they're not to give us a good story. To go what with tie into what you've been saying the entire time, the story is the king, and the characters, the setting, everything kind of blends into that and kind of supports that. But we want, this is all storytelling. Doesn't matter if it's a movie, a television show,
Mhm.
video game, whatever it is. It's a storytelling media, or these mediums are storytelling vehicles. And so I think comic books also have this same hurdle they have to get over of how do we keep people coming back when the story is never ending, when there is no third act. Everything
Mhm.
is like it's the illusion of the third act. We always get the first act, and then they just keep us in the second act. We never graduate to that third act for most comics. Like they have original graphic novels that are one and done stories. Like, okay, that has a beginning, middle, and end. But for these long running franchises, how do you keep people invested and coming back? And the advantage that comics have is that they can get them out a lot quicker, and the volume, they can produce a lot more. So a lot of the misses don't go, oh, they kind of go over people's heads, and it's like, whatever, I'll just read the next story, I'll read the next comic. And it was a
Mhm.
$5 comic or whatever it was. These movies, these multi-million dollar movies, they have to be, and TV shows as well. It's like they put so much behind it. If they're a failure, if the story is not good, then it's a huge detriment to the studio. And it's like, oh, now we can't make another one of these because it failed and because they didn't make enough revenue. So that's it's just something with our modern day movies and TV that we just have to get over.
Well, Disney's ponying up on this show, The Acolyte. It's $180 million. It took them 4 years to make it, and to put that in like translation, like that's 2x what it costs to make the Kenobi series, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. Like, can you imagine what that series would have been like had it gotten $180 million budget? It should
I
have, by the
I
way.
wish they had done
Um,
that as a movie instead of a TV
yeah,
show, like to
I've
get a
read
film budget.
Yeah, I've read online what the original script was for the Kenobi movie, and it's so much better than what we got as a
Yeah.
show. So it's terrible. But to put this also in perspective, I know inflation and all those things you got to kind of factor in, but but episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, cost $113 million to make. So like when you think about that in relation to $180 million Acolyte series, um, I don't know what $113 million in uh, um, today's, came out in 2005. So,
Yeah. Let's see if
it's
I got a
20
little
years ago.
inflation calculator
Just get
in
ChatGPT
today's.
to figure it out.
Today it would be 20. Wait a minute. Oh no, I'm missing a zero. Sorry. Yeah, I should ask ChatGPT.
Yeah. What would
100, you said 130?
113 million
Oh,
from
113.
2005 be in 2024?
I put 130, my bad. I got 181 million in this calculator.
So it's calculating people who are not. Yeah, it's about 1 point. Yeah, 180 million. So that's about right. So yeah, so we're this show is right at the level of a movie production for a Star Wars film.
It
Um,
is interesting that they had that much faith in it. That it just, I guess that goes to show how much the pitch of Leslie Headland was to Kathleen Kennedy. Like from what I've heard, and I texted you this earlier, Leslie
mhm.
Headland said it's Frozen meets Kill Bill. And whatever that pitch was, like Kathleen Kennedy was like, yes, this is what we need. This is exactly what we need. For them to have that much faith in it, that's very interesting.
Frozen meets Kill Bill. I'm trying to think what elements of Frozen make sense.
So
My guess
it's
is the
the sister.
the
Yeah,
sister relationship and the sort of
they got
dichotomy
split
between
up.
the two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now they're coming
Um,
back together.
meets Kill Bill. That's fascinating. Wow, well, that's a hell
Mhm.
of a pitch. Wow. Um,
And you think
I,
about
I
Skeleton Key is coming out later this year. I don't think
mhm.
that has as much faith as the Acolyte did
Skeleton
for
Crew, you
Disney.
mean?
Or Skeleton Crew,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think that one, and we don't know anything about that one. Like they haven't really given us a lot of detail. So my hopes are not, I mean, I don't have high expectations for that one, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
I mean, the jury's still out, right? I mean, I think it'll be really good. Have they released a trailer on that yet? Has there been
No,
a
they
no?
they haven't released a poster, a trailer. Like I think there's been one image that's been released, and
Yeah.
that was like a temporary placeholder. But other than that, it's like we're just going by the casting. That's all we know is the cast.
All right. We have derailed the show. We started off with our immediate thoughts. We went into things we like, things we didn't like, and then you sent me off into a galaxy far, far away around what I think the future of Star Wars should be and all that. This is good, but I want to bring us back to the Acolyte because that's what we're here to talk about. The Acolyte. I'm curious to where they're going to go with the next episode. It definitely feels like a kill. I see the Kill Bill connection now, where like these four people were all involved in this sort of event, this past situation involving these two sisters. We got a little bit of the history and the exposition dump on between Saul and his Padawan, um, and uh, so we're gonna get to meet the Jedi Wookiee, which I'm super excited about
Yeah,
in the next episode. What's his Kalbaka? Is that his name? Uh,
Kelneka.
Kelneka.
Yeah.
Uh,
When I saw
um,
him use the Force, I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. A Wookiee
yeah,
using the
just watching
Force.
a Wookiee like that to me, outside of a force sensitive Mandalorian, the scariest thing that I could possibly
Mm.
think of would be a force sensitive Wookiee, because not only can they just brute force rip your arms off, um, and like their roar is extremely intimidating, but now they have the ability to force choke you on top of that, or like pull a you know
Lightsaber.
a lightsaber. Like it's going to be very interesting to see how
Yeah.
they evolve that character. For fans or people of the show who are listening, George Lucas said he never wanted a Wookiee to be able to be force sensitive. So this is sort
Mm.
of breaking a George Lucas sort of thing that he didn't want to have.
I
So
wonder
very
why.
fascinating that they're going that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why. Maybe he thought that Wookiees were kind of like, I think he's described the Wookiee was like kind of the dog of
Yeah.
the
Right. Right.
Han Solo. He's got the cool
Hmm.
car, the Millennium
Yeah.
Falcon, and he's got his like pet, that like hangs out with
Right.
him. It's
Yeah.
like, so I think maybe he's like, a pet shouldn't be able to use the Force. That's
Yeah.
silly. We don't need Force sensitive cats and dogs and stuff like that. Um, this will be our YouTube short for this episode. Cats. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, just going back to like I'm hooked. It's going to be very interesting to see how the story unveils. Naturally, as a fan of Star Wars, I'm curious who the Sith is. Like that's the mystery that I'm most interested in, not necessarily the mystery behind these two sisters and all that. Um, I'm more interested in who is this guy with the helmet, um, who's talking about the acolyte killing the dream. Um, you gave me an interesting fan theory the other day when we talked. I want you to share this because I think it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, when I was watching it the second time, I came to, and I have this thing where if I'm watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie or something that I know there's a twist in it, my mind just starts firing off. Okay, what is every single possibility that I can think of? And a lot of times, not everything I think of is correct, but I'm like, one of those things, if I throw enough darts at the board, it's gonna hit the bullseye at some point. So as I was watching it the second time, and I'm thinking of who is the mystery Sith, I said, wait a minute. Manny Jacinto's character comes out of nowhere and he knows a lot about whatever's going on because May says to him like don't tell the master and he mentions him and all this stuff. And when she comes back at the very end of the second episode when they're about to leave, he wards her off. He does some martial arts. He knows where this Wookiee Jedi is on another thing, and
Mhm.
it's like he just knows too much information for him to just be a side character. And Manny Jacinto has been in a ton of press. I'm like, why is he so important? Right? Like, if he's just a side character, why would he be on the press tour with everybody? And if you look on the, there's been a bunch of posters where he is the only actor of the main cast that is on these press tours that's not on the poster, but they show that Sith on the poster. So I'm like, man, I think that's him. I don't like to I like to be surprised. So I don't like to guess it in advance, but it's just there's too many things pointing to him being the Sith. Um
Well, I mean, it would be very much similar in the sort of Palpatine realm of somebody being very close to a group of people um, that's doing manipulative things.
yes.
That is a very Sith thing to do. So, as surprising as it would be, it's almost not surprising in some way that you're kind of going that route and who you think that character is. So, I'm I bought in. Uh, I'm buying what you're selling. I don't have anything that I could pitch that's that good.
Acolyte
Because I think it
surprise
would be
us.
I think it would be silly if it was a Jedi, like and or somebody somebody that's it very well could be. I mean, the 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 thing about the Sith Jedi, right? It's like they're Force users. They just have very ideological differences between how they should use the Force and things like that. Um, so anyway, yeah.
There's no
So
inquisitors at this point. So yeah, it's either you're a Jedi or you're a Sith. And the Jedi are acting like they don't know the Sith are around because the only mention that we have close to this is episode 1. Well, the Sith have been just
the
gone for
Sith
a
has been
millennia.
extinct for millennia.
So yeah, nobody else is using the Force. So
Right?
it has to be a Sith. I don't think it's going to be Dark Jedi or somebody like that.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. And then, there's always that question like, let's say this is successful. What comes next? Is there an Acolyte season 2 or is there
Yeah.
like is this like an anthology thing where like, okay, this is 100 years before the prequels. Let's do another one that's like 50 years,
Mm,
and just like see how
yeah.
this kind of has evolved.
Right. That's
Because I do
interesting.
like the idea of bridging the gap into how you go from this High Republic era um, to the fall of the Republic
Yeah.
and the fall of the Jedi. And you're seeing kernels of that. We talked about it earlier, like where there seems to be this perception that the Jedi aren't as well favored as they once were. You even heard a throwaway line almost between Saul and who's the green girl? I'm horrible
Oh,
with names.
Vernestra Rowe.
Vernestra.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, he says something along the lines of like, this could give our political enemies uh, a lot of ammunition. And it's like the Jedi are starting to butt up against the Republic and political enemies and things like that. Meanwhile, and I loved that you had the Trade Federation, like, uh, alien dudes
Yeah.
showing up there, and it's like, so you have like these corporate folks that are involved, and so it's like you're starting to see the beginning of where we kind of find the world in Phantom Menace and
Right.
beyond.
Yeah.
So
And it's like, what changed from the High Republic era where Jedi were plentiful, they were all over the galaxy, they were helping
mhm.
in the Outer Rim and all this stuff, to the point where we're getting into the prequels and they're all kind of on Coruscant. Like, what causes them to collapse? And then obviously we saw from the prequels to the original trilogy, it going down to just Luke Skywalker. Um, Although we've been getting all these stories of, oh yeah, there was other Jedi that you didn't know about in the background, but
Yeah,
I want to know, how did they go from so many to so few?
yeah, yeah, and then even like the transition, like you see in the prequels, like it's brown and sort of earthly, sort of monkish type like robes, like they almost kind of look like they're the poor
Right.
people of the
Yeah.
galaxy, especially hanging out
Yes.
in Coruscant where everybody's like kind
Right.
of dolled up.
Yeah. Exactly.
Versus
And
like in the
even
High Republic area, it's like these they almost look royal, like
yes.
regal,
Hmm.
gold and white,
Yes.
and like these mythical sort of things.
Hmm.
It would equate them to like the elves in Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings.
Right.
Like it had very
Even on
much that.
the towers of the Jedi Temple, there's gold on each one of those, and we don't see
Mhm.
that in the original or the prequels. So yeah, why did they lose all that? Why aren't they as regal as they were? What causes them to fall? So that is interesting to me. I want to know that as well.
Yeah, I hope we get to see that. Though again, we're talking. You go back to your question, like, what does Star Wars need? I think Star Wars has an opportunity to take any question that a fan has or somebody watching the show and make that into a story. And if you have the right characters, the right narrative, and the right elements, it could be a great story. Again, Rogue One, perfect example of that. Somebody woke up one day and was like, "Hey, um,
That
you
one
know,
line
that one
in
line,
the crawl.
let's turn that into a movie." And here we are. So
Yeah.
it's like, um, and we have the same questions of what happened after Return of the Jedi, and we've gotten some answers to that now with Mandalorian and um, the books and comics and things like that. So it's like there's tons of areas where you can play. I
Right.
think with
But
anything
just
though, it runs the risk of you become Star Trek. Um,
mm,
so I grew up with Star Trek. Like it was always on TV. Like I remember my parents like plan their evening around like Star Trek: The Next Generation and like
nice.
the six other shows that were on that were Star Trek at the same time, Deep Space Nine and Voyager and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, like Star Trek just went away.
Hmm.
And I think people
Right.
were just tired of it because it was like the
Right.
same crap. Like it was just the same crap every episode, every week across these shows. And it was like, we need to do something different. And JJ brings it back. You get the Kelvin timeline. People are interested in it again, and that's a perfect example of when you have a great story, good cast, phenomenal production value. Obviously, it's a big blockbuster movie. It was it was a knockout, and audiences who had never seen a Star Trek movie or show gravitated to it, and there was an event around it, and it got two other movies, and I think we might get another one. But the point is I keep making my same point here: is nostalgia, narrative. Boom. There's a reason why James Bond continues to um, exist generationally across in cinema. You know, is because they allow filmmakers to come in and say, okay, we're going to still honor Connery and what was that version, but also take it into new generations. You get Daniel Craig, you know, so that's what you got
That's
to
what
do.
Star Wars needs. That's what they
That's what
need.
they just need me. That's what they need.
Yeah. Let's hire
I just
Kevin Cole to write all of
I
these
still
new
want to do
shows.
my pitch. Like we talked about it. I think our very one of our very first. I still want to do that, whether it's a series or a movie. Like it would be so awesome to go 1,000 years beyond the sequel trilogy, and like similar to the High Republic, like put it in a state where like, hey, the galaxy's like kind of well-oiled machine, like everybody's happy. There hasn't been any wars going on, no civil war, no major conflicts. Everybody's kind of doing their thing. You still have pirates, you still have bounty hunters, you still have all that stuff, but like being able to have an external threat that is different and new to the galaxy could be a very fascinating thing.
Right.
So
Because it can't just be Jedi and Sith over and over again. And
yeah.
that's why I think in the High Republic, in the opposite direction, they have the Nile, which are these space pirates, and they don't
Hmm.
have the Sith as their antagonists. So, yeah, it has to be something else. But then you get into that argument okay, well, is it really Star Wars if there are no Jedi and Sith? To a lot of people, that is Star Wars, is that conflict between the Jedi and the Sith. But I'm I just want a good story told. If the Jedi and Sith are in it, okay. If they're not in it, okay,
There,
that's fine
there
also.
was no
But tell
Jedi
me
or
a good.
Sith. There was no Jedi or Sith in Rogue One. It was a great story. There was no Jedi and Sith in Andor, and it was a great story. So, like, Star Wars is about, again, I think one thing you have in the Acolyte that feels familiar, hey, Star Wars fans, listen, is that didn't like it, is you had a green alien person that has a lot of wisdom that's over there, like, hanging out in the Jedi Temple, Yoda. Um, you have two sisters. That's family drama, right? So that's a
Which
familiar piece. Um, you have Jedi's. You have probably a Sith. It's got to be, and you have ships flying around doing stuff and droids and you have some humor and so it's you can still have all of those things but also chart some new territory. So
Yes. I want to say something real quick. There are two things that I forgot to mention. I also recorded a podcast about this, about the Acolyte. And I don't know why, but I completely forgot to mention. I think the sisters are going to end up being a much better version of the Force dyad than Ray and Kylo were. I think the way that they're doing it, the way that they can talk to each other, they have this connection, they can take each other places, and they have this subconscious thing. I think they're fleshing it out more of this dyad. Obviously, we've only gotten 2 episodes of it so far, but I think as this series progresses, they're gonna continue to kind of develop that, and May is gonna, even though she's kind of like the Kylo. She's doing these bad things, but I think she's going to get redeemed in the end. And they're going to say, well, that whatever it was that the Jedi did, that was bad. And so May is justified in killing them. And so we're going to, I think, relate to her more. That's just my speculation. And then the other thing I was going to say was the effects. I think this show, much like Andor, does a great job of practical effects, people in
mhm,
costume walking around,
mhm.
puppetry, and then I couldn't see if there was any shots on the volume. It feels like they're going to sets, they're going outside and they're filming these things versus I think that was the biggest problem with Ahsoka, besides the story, was everything felt so small and it felt like it was on the volume. It didn't feel like they went out to places and filmed stuff. So I think that is another thing. You at the very beginning of this conversation, you were asking me what kind of stood out to me. It was the martial arts, which I loved, and then the practical effects.
Yeah,
Like it that
real
felt like original
places,
Star
real
Wars.
people. Again, that's Star Wars. Like where you could take a place in Tuscany and make it look like Naboo. I think these were real places,
It
and
looked
stuff
great,
like
all
that.
of them.
Yeah,
That
and again,
Wookiee
I think,
planet or wherever he ended up, that Wookiee Jedi, that looked great. Those trees and that opening
oh
shot when
yeah,
you're coming in there.
I think that ties into again $180 investment that Disney's making. It's like, hey, we heard you. The fans are not really enjoying this whole volume thing. We need to maybe up the costs, and it's a big enough story to justify it. So we'll see. What I don't know. is the whatever the Nielsen ratings are,
Mhm.
for this. Like, was it positive? Was it okay?
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think Disney
you know,
releases those, do they?
I don't think they do. I know Netflix is on Nielsen now, so like you can see
Oh,
stuff like that. But like, yeah, it would be interesting to see like was this from a premiere perspective considered successful? Like,
yeah,
did Disney increase subscribers?
right.
Did
Yeah,
um, you know, did everybody that owns a Disney Plus account tune in at 9 Pacific time to
right.
watch, or 6 Pacific, whatever it was, to watch the show? Um, and what does that translate to? So
Yeah, I'd really be interested to hear that because with with Max, you have HBO as the cable channel, so you can see like how many people tuned in to House of the Dragon for the finale, how many people are watching from week to week. With these streamers, like you said, Netflix are just now starting to, but for years it was like Netflix kept those numbers guarded. They
mhm.
wouldn't tell you what their, how popular they were. And I think the only thing we can go off of it is, do they get a repeat season? Do they get another season? Oh, it must have been popular enough that they are investing more money into it. So I don't know if we will know unless we see an Acolyte 2.
Yeah, agreed. Well, where do we go from here? I think I think I'm locked in, I'm tuned in. I'm it's Star Wars, so as a Star Wars fan, it's always nice to have something new to spend my time in. Um and I do hope it's a success. I really do. And by success I mean it succeeds in, you know, keeping original fans and fans of Star Wars interested in the properties and open to new things. But I also hope it succeeds in getting new people that, younger generation that see Osha and May and say, "Oh wow, that's my favorite Star Wars character
Yes,
now," or
yes, yes.
they're the new Ahsokas for me, or you know, you get a bunch of people dressed up like Saul on Halloween,
Yeah.
or people dressed up like this
That
Sith Lord or whatever, like
yeah.
that to me is when you think about a franchise like this, is that you want to have people investing their time and money and things into making these things exist beyond the screen. And I will say, as much of a uh, criticism the sequel trilogy gets, they accomplish that because it's Star Wars. There's little girls out there that wear Ray outfits now. Um, you didn't see that, um, and so I think you just that's the one thing you can hope for is the extension beyond the screen. People just investing in that, and hopefully the Acolyte has that. Um,
Yeah.
but this is always a fun time. Always awesome diving into these shows. I want to end with one thing: the Force bubble. I can't get my mind off of it. This guy's in like a 15-year like force coma thing, like just hanging out. How does he eat? How does he drink? How does he stay alive? How does he go to the bathroom? Like, what are we doing here? Like, that to me is, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for that man, or whatever kind of species he is. I'm just really concerned. I probably would have taken the poison waking up from that, because I would have had nothing to live for. But to your point, though, what kind of crazy thing did you do in your life to warrant going into like a 13 or 10-year or whatever it was coma, uh, meditative state, with a force bubble around you, um, to then want to um, kill yourself instantly when you come out of it? And that's fascinating to me. Um, the
Because he thought there was more honor in taking his own life than trying to come up with, retribution or
Mhm.
apologizing. I there was basically in his mind there was nothing he could do to continue living and make up for what he did. So, we're gonna find out obviously what happens, but yeah, that
What
is
is the
very
name of
interesting.
this sort of meditative state? What do they call
The
that?
bearish vow,
The
which
bearish
actually
vow.
comes from the Darth Vader comic book. That the same issue I was telling you about, where Darth Vader is sent and he has to go through a trial where he doesn't, or he wins the battle without a weapon. The person he's fighting was in that bearish vow, so
Mm.
that this concept is fairly new in Star Wars. That was like within the last 5 years that Darth Vader comic came out. So that is a new thing in Star Wars. But I want to know, like you, how do they maintain living? How do they get nourishment for their bodies? How do they?
The
Uh,
only thing I can think of is the midi chlorians. The force itself is
ooh,
what keeps
that
them
could,
alive. Like that's the only
yeah,
thing I
that
can
could,
think of.
yeah,
Like it nourishes
yeah,
them, through,
that
or
makes sense.
whatever. But
Hmm. But yeah,
it's
that
an
it's
it's
gonna.
an energy field. It binds us, surrounds us, penetrates us. Yeah,
I
there it is.
love learning more information about the Force, like what it is, and the distinction between the supernatural and then the science of the force. Like people don't want it to be defined as one or the other, and I think
Hmm.
Disney has kind of, maybe they're falling in the middle. Like, oh yeah, it's both. It's mystical and it's science. I think you can have it both ways. So I want to. I just, like I said, if they had gone with George Lucas's original story that he was going with, and we got explored more about the wills and more about the force, like that stuff is interesting to me. I wish we got more of that.
Well, it's interesting. Qui Gon Jinn in the prequels used to say the living
Yes,
force,
yes,
and that
yes.
always stood out to me
Yeah.
because, and he was considered a little bit of like a maverick, like
Hmm.
that's why he
Hmm.
was not on the council
Yeah.
and stuff because he kind of had some of these ideas that, hey, wait a minute, like the force is a living thing. It's and they already knew about midi chlorians and stuff. So I don't know, very interesting to me. Um,
There's
just
actually
all
a
the different
book.
ways you can go with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
There's actually a book that just came out in April called Star Wars The Living Force.
mm,
And it's a year before The Phantom Menace. And it's all about the Jedi Council going around, and they're splitting up and they're going on these different missions. But it's Qui Gon, it's Yoda, it's Mace Windu. So if you're interested in the Living Force, you might want to check that book out. I haven't read it yet, but I bought the audio book and I'm trying to listen to it and get through it that way.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is interesting. The force is a fascinating thing to open up discussion. Uh, we'll tease this. This is rumor at this point. We have not verified that this is true, and we certainly have not seen the next two episodes. We'll talk about it if it comes out. But we have heard that there is a reference in the Acolyte upcoming episodes of the Force being referred to as her or she or a female. And I find that very fascinating. I don't really have a problem with it. I don't really care. You know, uh, I have heard people talk about God as a she. I have heard people talk about Mother Earth as a she. The ocean, if Saul, sits there and says the force is an ocean, sailors and seamen and stuff like that, they refer to the ocean as she. Um, so if you want the force to be a she, you just go right on with it. I don't really care. Does not bother me one bit. You know, so
Yeah, I don't have um, a thought on it either way. I just want them to give us an explanation. I don't want them to just say that and then leave it, not give us, okay,
I'm
this
with
is
you.
the
Yeah,
reasoning.
I think that's what opens up the can of worms, right? It's is it just a like what I'm saying? It's just it's a referential thing, or is it actually a legitimate like gender of a female?
Right.
Um,
And why? Like what? Because then what is male? Because there has to be that, the yin and the yang. And if the force itself is one thing, what is the opposite? What's the negative force, right? Maybe that's now if they come up with that and they give us that reasoning in this show, then it'll make more like I'll be more on board if they're like, all right, and by the way, there's an anti-force and that's male. Like that would appease me. But if they just say, oh yeah, it's female, they never say anything again, then it'll be like, why did they say that?
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's the danger, right? Just to go into this kind of juxtaposition and throw this thing out there, they're gonna like um, end up having to create an entire new like era of Star Wars just to answer the question, right? And we do know, we said it earlier, James Mangold, he's working on a Force Origin sort
I
of
can't wait.
movie.
Mm,
It's gonna be very
yeah.
interesting. Sean
It's supposed to
Levy's
have
got a
the
movie coming out, like
yeah.
for Star Wars. Like, there's a lot of interesting creators that are going to have their hands in the Star Wars pond
Yeah.
soon.
Who knows
So
if Taika Waititi's movie ever gets made, but
yeah, we
um
still got
there's
Filoni. He's like the chief creative officer now, so he's like helping steer the whole creative tableau
yeah.
of.
Did they announce a director for the Ray movie? Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, it's is it not Obed Chinoy? Is it not the same? Is that her name?
Oh,
So
yeah. You know what? I'm pulling up some articles and somebody was saying that they were fired. Yeah, we'll have to look into that, but that
yeah, we'll
there
look at it.
isn't any strong filmmaker attached, I don't think, to the Ray movie right now.
Yeah, and they had the Rogue Squadron movie or whatever it was
Yeah,
called
that
that Patty
yeah.
Jenkins was going to
Yeah.
do,
I
and I
forgot
don't,
about that.
nobody's
Right.
nobody's really,
Yeah, it was off, it was on, it's off, it's on.
yeah, we'll see. Um, I think Disney is starting to figure out. We've heard Bob Iger say this. We've said it. Quality over quantity is what matters. It's all about the storytelling. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Telling really good, compelling stories about people. It just happens to be people that live in space with laser swords and cool ships. So, anyway, this has been the Fuse Film Podcast. We have dropped into Acolyte. We're going to be back next week to talk more about Acolyte episode 3. And hopefully, we'll have more things unveiled on this mystery. It's going to be very wild, very cool. So, thank you, Mr. Vactor, for joining me on the Fuse Film Podcast, as always. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Click, subscribe, share, listen, do whatever you need to do. Get us out there. We love you guys. Peace.